player, pass rusher that are hard to find. And to me, it's just, I think, a crazy move on the part of John Gruden and Reggie McKenzie. I'm not sure how much Reggie had to do with it.
I don't think he had anything to do with it.
Yeah, and to make that deal and get draft picks that are going to be uncertain, and how do you know how they turn out, and you're giving up a sure thing, and wow, what a difference he's made for the Bears. So will I say it's as bad as the Herschel trade? Maybe. Yeah. We'll see how it all unfolds, and we got to see what kind of players they get in return with those picks and all that. So it's premature to judge the finality of it. But right now it does not look good, and even Gruden's admitting that maybe we shouldn't have made this deal.
Yeah, no kidding. And I've told this story elsewhere on the network, like on the Viking Update show. But in case we have different listeners for this podcast, I'll give you my version of things. I'm covering the Cowboys as a rookie NFL beat writer, and I was covering actually with Tim Kalishaw from the Dallas Morning News. We were teaming up that year. He was the veteran, I was the pup. And the day the trade happened, we didn't know. We were like, Mike, the word around the league was, okay, the Cowboys are going to get these 5 decent to okay players. And yeah, they could keep the draft picks, but Jimmy Johnson's so desperate to win, they're going to keep the players and let the picks go back. So that's not a bad deal, right, for the Vikings. So we all kind of operated on that premise for about 24 hours. Kalishaw goes on TV in Dallas that night and ripped Jimmy, who he liked a lot, said, yeah, he traded his best player for 5 guys who weren't that good, Well, the next day, and this is the old days, this is not like current lockdown CIA type NFL headquarters. We just walked around Valley Ranch, We'd walk around, I'd knock on Jerry Jones's door, I'd knock on Jimmy's door, we'd just talk to people, So we're walking by an office, and Dave Pelletier, who would later come here to be a PR guy, was assistant PR guy down there. He pulls us into the copy room and says, hey, Jimmy wants to talk to you guys. Jimmy comes in, and he's ticked, and he's basically yelling at us. And he's like, you idiots, don't you know what I did? And we're like, yeah, you traded your best player for 5 guys who were okay. He goes, no, I traded a guy who isn't any good and doesn't fit in our offense and wasn't going to be here long anyway for 85 first-round picks. And I'm keeping the picks. You know what? I'm going to keep the players too. And we're like, oh, that changes things.
Yeah, how are you going to do that? Yeah. And he did.
Oh, man.
Crazy. Well, since we're talking history, we've been talking for 3 weeks about how I need to tell you the Jim McMahon story.
Oh, please.
My
Yes,
Jim
do.
McMahon story. So this is my negotiation with Jim McMahon back in 1993. We're looking for a quarterback basically for 1 year, 2 years or whatever. And so it's the second year that Denny was here, and we had won the division the year before. It's the year before we acquire Warren Moon, before I made that deal. So looking for a quarterback. We had Sean Salisbury still here, and so I'm negotiating with Steve.
And Sean talked a good game.
Yeah, he sure did. Still does, actually. And so I was negotiating with Steve Zucker, Jim McMahon's agent out of Chicago. And at this point in Jim's career, of course, he had been the Bears' Super Bowl quarterback and had gone to Philadelphia later as a backup. And so we brought him in for his visit. I really liked Jim. He was a character and fun guy to talk to, and talked about the old days, talked about how he beat our butts when he was with the Bears, and on too many occasions, such as that Thursday night when he came off the bench and threw, 2 or 3 touchdown passes.
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember that very well. And so, anyway, I'm negotiating with him, or with his agent, Steve Zucker, after Jim leaves after his visit. And we're going round and round, and I finally say, okay, Steve, this is the final deal. We got to get this thing done because we're getting close to training camp. We got to get it, or mini camp. We got to get him in here, learn the offense and everything. So I say it's 1 year, basically 1 year. I think it was $1.6 million or something at the time, plus big incentives if he gets us to the playoffs, Super Bowl, all that. And so Steve said, and I said, I really need to know now because otherwise I got to go out to my next guy. So Steve says to me, okay, let me talk to Jim. I'll call you right back. So he calls me back 10 minutes later and says, well, I just talked to Jim and we can't take that deal. He just can't do it. I said, okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that. And I said, okay, I'll talk to you later. Hang up. So I did something I don't usually do. And I always tell this story when I speak. I do a lot of speaking to college classes and on negotiation. And I always tell this story about I like to talk about some of my interesting negotiations I had. And someday I'll tell you about the Chris Dolman negotiation.
Yes, please.
With David Falk, who you know also. But anyways, today it's Jim McMahon. And so we're talking. So I did something I don't usually do, which I called the player. And I don't usually call a guy, but I really liked Jim. I liked him personally. So I called him and I said, hey, Jim, I just want to thank you for coming in for the visit. I really enjoyed visiting with you. And I'm sorry it's not going to work out. And he goes, oh, really? He says, well, what's going on? I haven't talked to my agent in 3 weeks. And so
I'm shocked. I'm shocked an agent would do that.
Yeah. And I said, oh, really? Well, hang on, Jim, let me call you back in a couple of minutes. So I immediately got on the phone with Steve Zucker, starts swearing up and down at me. How dare you call my player? How dare you? That's not proper protocol. And this and that. I said, Steve, I was only calling to thank him for coming in for his visit. And he was the one who broached the subject about what's going on with the contract. And he said, so he hangs up on me, and of course calls me back 2 minutes later and says, we'll take the deal. So catching the agent in a bald-faced lie was kind of an interesting experience.
Yes. How many times did you catch agents in bald-faced lies?
Not too often like that. I'll say that. And of course, Jim came that year and led us to the playoffs as a wild card team. And had a pretty decent season. And next off season, we made the trade for Warren Moon.
Wow. I mean, that's the thing. You guys had an amazing array of veteran quarterbacks come through.
Yeah, we sure did, and let Rich Gannon get out the door, who later became an MVP in the NFL. So,
well, let's talk. We're kind of doing the history thing, which I love. Here's what I heard as a beat writer at that time. Because in 92, Denny comes in, and here's why I don't react to the Herschel trade the way a lot of people do. Because you guys were in the playoffs 2 years later. I mean, I know it hurt. I know you gave up assets, but you also bounced back and were really good the rest of the decade. It didn't crush you.
No.
And you came this close from the Super Bowl. You go in the Super Bowl in 98. So you get off to the hot start in 92 with Denny. And great coaching staff, Chris Carter coming on, a really interesting team. Then I heard from some coaches midseason, well, Denny thinks Rich isn't that big a guy, he's getting beat up. So we're going to kind of, let Sean play a game or two. Then we'll get Rich back in there and gear up for the playoffs. And then Sean comes in, and he's best friends with Jack Del Rio. And all of a sudden, they kind of take over the locker room. And Sean plays well, and you win, and Denny couldn't go back to Rich. That was the way I heard it. What was your perspective on all that?
That may be some truth to that, and I think that Rich was the more talented player, clearly,
no question.
And was getting banged around a little bit that year, and still was very early in his career too.
Right.
He was not the player that he later became in Oakland, of course, and so. And by the time he got to that point in his career, we'd already been through Randall Cunningham and Brad Johnson and drafted Dante Culpepper and all those type of things that had happened. And by then I was down in Tennessee. But yeah, I think that's kind of what happened, that Sean started playing fairly well and unfortunately not good enough to win us a playoff game.
No, you guys lost to a really banged up Redskins team first game at the Metrodome, and Joe Gibbs I don't know. Your perspective, I always feel like Joe Gibbs might have been the best I ever saw. And it's tough because Parcells is right there too. But the fact that I just saw Gibbs win with I guess the way I look at it is Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different non-Hall of Fame quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And 3 different running backs, none of whom are Hall of Fame. Well, I think Riggins is the one guy who's a Hall of Fame. But he just seemed to be able to win with anybody.
Yeah, I think he was that kind of coach strategically, just an offensive guy kind of ahead of his time, and had been tutored in I guess in the Sid Gilman era out in San Diego, and just really I think was a great football coach and had a way of motivating his team, and he also had Bobby Beathard involved in that group, and Bobby Beathard, a Hall of Fame GM. Right. And that was when Bobby was at his best, not necessarily when he was in San Diego and drafted Ryan Leaf, but when he drafted those Washington Redskin teams, those were pretty good teams, and had Charlie Casserly in that front office. And so there was a lot of talent. The offensive line, of course, was great, the Hogs and all those type of things. But yeah, those were some interesting years, and it was tough because we had good teams, and then we couldn't win a playoff game until we got to 97 and won that miracle game in the Meadowlands, and then kind of took off from there in 98.
Did Denny ever drive you crazy? Because I remember at that win, you had the miracle win at the Meadowlands, and Denny, I can't remember his exact comment, but basically his post-game demeanor was, "Yep, I had that one the whole time."
Yeah, exactly. Of course. He actually, I had a fantastic relationship with him until he decided
until he tried to get you fired. Yeah,
right, exactly. But he did me a favor because I ended up in Tennessee with a better job. So and we went to a Super Bowl there, so it was okay.
Right. Let's talk about the Rams, who I'm fascinated by, and Patrick Mahomes, who I'm really fascinated by. I do want to once again remind you, do us a favor, go to bitesquad.com or download their app. Use the promo code TalkNorth, one word, TalkNorth. Promo code on the website is right below the credit card information in blue type. Some people have trouble seeing it, but just type in Talk North there. It'll knock some dollars off of your order. We do appreciate it. Thank you very much. So Vikings playing at Rams on Thursday night, and they look to me like they're really dangerous. I think the head coach really knows what he's doing. They hired Wade Phillips, who's a great defensive coordinator. They got the running back, who everybody's who's great in the running game, great in the passing game. They have 3 receivers you have to cover. The quarterback looks like he knows how he's playing. Looks like he knows what he's doing. Fierce defensive line. They're going to be injured, at cornerback on Thursday night, but they do a very good cornerback play. Am I missing something, or is this maybe the next super team?
Well, they're pretty good, but I do think that we have to see with the Rams, because they do have Jared Goff, who looks like he's coming on, and Todd Gurley, obviously, and the 3 receivers, and Cooks, Woods, and Kupp, and very dangerous group, no doubt about that. But Goff has not won a playoff game yet,
right?
And the Vikings handled them pretty well last November. Now, there were some things that happened in that game, as we recall. I think that was the game when Adam Thielen broke the long touchdown, and I think the Rams fumbled on the goal line or something.
Fumbled on the 1-yard line on a hit from Anthony Harris.
Right.
When it was still a pretty close game.
Yeah, exactly. The Rams scored their first drive in that game, but the Vikings ended up winning 24-7. Goff does not throw a touchdown pass in that game. Gurley, they held to 37 yards rushing. Now, we keep hearing that this is the same defense plus Sheldon Richardson.
Right.
That they had 10 returning starters, but they're not quite playing like that same defense of early last year. Maybe they didn't play so hot in the second half of the New Orleans game against Philly. And so is the defense going to come on now? And I think that's a big question coming into Thursday night and then going into the Philadelphia game. Are they going to reassert themselves, stop these blown coverages that we're seeing? And a lot of that has emanated from when Trey Waynes leaves the game and then Mike Hughes comes in, and it seems like there's a lot of blown coverages surrounding the rookie. Now, he's made some big plays too, but there have been some screw-ups, and that can happen with young players. So, but I think Mackenzie Alexander's been part of that too. And, for example, the 55-yard catch and run by the running back for Buffalo the other day, that was a tough play that it looked like Mackenzie Alexander let him go, and they couldn't quite pick it up, and so mistakes are made. And I think that one of the things that I want to see is better play from Anthony Barr, to play like a Pro Bowl guy, not be making stupid penalties, and such as he did in the last game. And I think that was the face mask was a huge penalty in that game early on. The horse collar, he just has to be smarter than that. He's a Pro Bowl guy making, $12 million a year?
Yep.
So he's got to be better than that. And Kendricks also has been involved with a few missed coverages, and maybe it's not his fault. He's also made some good plays, ripped out the ball at the goal line against Green Bay, a big play in that game. And so, but those two guys are really important players to them. I think they need to elevate their play. Especially if Everson Griffen is missing. Weatherly had a pretty nice game the other day. But again, you're losing some depth, and you're going into L.A., and you're playing against a team that's a up-tempo, high-powered offensive team. And so those are some of my concerns going into this game. And I think that the Rams, I think it's a big loss when you take Marcus Peters and keep Talib out of the lineup. And then you're going with some other guys who are not starters caliber. Sam Shields is a veteran guy, but still, Peters and Talib are Pro Bowl caliber corners that they spent a lot of money on, and it doesn't look like either one of them is going to play this week.